They lied to you when they said power is born of kindness. Real power, the kind that shapes destinies and decides who rises or falls, is neither gentle nor innocent. It's made of silent manipulation, of masks that deceive, of fears that control. Machiavelli once said that politics should be guided by reality, not ideals, and reality is harsh. Those who play too fair end up crushed by the board. You may believe that love conquers more than fear, but sooner or later you discover that it's better to be feared than loved, as long as you're never hated. The uncomfortable truth is that we've all been pawns in this game. You may think you act by free choice, but you don't realize that someone calculated your reaction, turned your emotions into weaknesses, and your pursuit of pleasure into guilt. The most influential people don't explicitly display strength. They create dependency, manipulate silences, and disappear on purpose. Every gesture is a strategy. Every word is measured. Every absence is planned. The end justifies the means when victory leaves no trace. And the most disturbing thing is that you don't have to be a king, CEO, or politician to use or suffer these weapons. They're in your relationships, at work, even on the screens you look at before bed. The question isn't whether you believe it or not. The question is, how many of these weapons are already being used against you right now? And even more so, are you ready to learn how to use them too? The game of mask and persona. Every human being wears masks, whether they like it or not. The curious thing is that often the person themselves believe they are the mask they wear. The persona, as some say, is a form of social armor, but also an invisible prison. And it is in this silent theater that a Machiavellian truth reveals itself. Whoever masters the game of appearances controls the course of the relationship. The appearance of virtue is worth more than the virtue itself because the other's gaze is guided by what they see, not by what they are. Machiavelli taught that politics should be guided by reality, not by ideals. And the reality is that people trust the projected image more than their hidden character. This is why leaders, from emperors to modern CEOs, carefully craft their masks. The chosen clothing, the way of speaking, even the silence charged with intention. It all communicates. This is where virtu and fortuna meet, the ability to show yourself at the right time and the luck of being seen in the right way. And have you understood how your mask shapes how the world treats you? Imagine a politician on the campaign trail. He knows that deep down, voters won't truly know him. What they vote for is the mask, the rehearsed smile, the convincing speech, the hand on the shoulder at the right time. It's a calculated performance, a decision based on real human nature. People want leaders who appear compassionate, but they respect even more those who display confidence and firmness. Hence the Machiavellian dilemma: better to be feared than loved, but never hated. Hated, no mask can sustain. Thus, those who play this game must build a persona that inspires respect, but never arouses repulsion. It's like an actor who knows when to exaggerate emotion and when to back off, always maintaining the appearance of virtue. This skill is what separates those who go unnoticed from those who dictate the course of events. In everyday life, anyone can apply this game. Think about a workplace. That colleague everyone sees as competent is often not the most talented, but the one who firmly maintains their persona. They speak little, but when they do, they convey clarity. They act with calculated force, never wearing themselves out in pointless arguments, only intervening at the right moment. This isn't coincidence, it's strategy. It's like building your own loyal armies. Your network of trust is anchored in the image you project. Even in the digital world, the mask matters. Those who master their own narrative on Instagram or LinkedIn create a greater sphere of influence than those who lose themselves in showing everything about themselves. And deep down, this is where the game becomes dangerous. The mask protects, but it also imprisons. And when the other discovers that there's something beyond it, silent fear is born. The power of using silent fear. Silent fear is more effective than shouting or open threats. It settles like an invisible shadow, hovering in the air, needing no name. Machiavelli knew this. The end justifies the means when the means is to build an intimidating presence without raising a voice. A leader who never shows a loss of control, but whose gaze silences the room, wields this power. Its politics guided by reality. Human beings react more quickly to fear than to the promise of reward. This fear isn't of beatings, but of the invisible consequence. That's why it's silent, calculated, like a knife's edge, that no one sees but everyone feels. And yet, it shouldn't be confused with hatred, because a hated leader loses control. The secret is the fine line. Better to be feared than loved, but never to be hated. Want a practical example? Think about teachers. There are those who shout, gesture, threaten, and end up being ridiculed by students in the hallways. But there's the other type. The one who rarely raises their voice, but whose mere presence is enough to get the room organized. This is the silent fear, the calculated use of force. It's not about brutality, but about the perception that there will be consequences if the line is crossed. This also applies to relationships, business, or politics. The absence of constant excuses, silence when everyone expects a reaction, a firm gesture at the right moment, all this creates an atmosphere of respect. And it is this atmosphere that becomes a kind of loyal army, upholding authority. Silence in this context speaks louder than 1,000 words. It's interesting to observe how historical leaders have applied this principle. Think of CEOs like Steve Jobs. He didn't need to shout all the time. All it took was a critical look, and everyone understood there was something to be fixed. Silent fear is based on decisions shaped by true human nature. We all, deep down, fear losing recognition, status, or position. By exploiting this fragility, those who play this game maintain control. It's like wielding virtù and fortuna, knowing when to be firm and when to let silence itself become the answer. But this power requires balance. Excess can breed resentment, and resentment is the seed of hatred. Using fear as an invisible weapon opens the door to the next step, the art of transforming this shadow into something even more subtle: emotional dependence. The art of creating emotional dependence. Emotional dependence is one of the most subtle weapons anyone can wield. It's not about visible chains, but psychological bonds that tighten each time the other person feels they can no longer live without that presence. Machiavelli already suggested that the end justifies the means when the goal is to secure loyalty. And there is no loyalty more solid than that born of emotion. Instead of being trapped by constant fear, a game of presence and absence, of approval and silence, is created, which makes the other person incessantly seek validation. It's a policy guided by reality. Human beings want to belong, they want to be seen. When someone discovers how to manipulate this desire, a nearly unbreakable cycle is formed. This is the difference between having followers of convenience and loyal armies of their own. The emotional bond, once established, is stronger than any contract. In practice, this mechanism appears in romantic relationships, friendships, and even in the workplace. The boss, who sometimes praises enthusiastically and sometimes remains silent in the face of an achievement, keeps his team emotionally alert. You never know when validation will come, and it's precisely this uncertainty that holds you back. It's like giving a calculated dose of the appearance of virtue, showing kindness at strategic moments, but never giving everything. Machiavelli would call this a calculated use of force, not in the physical sense, but in the psychic. The other person begins to organize their life around that approval, as if it were a sun around which all the planets orbit, and the more the person gives themselves, the harder it becomes to break the relationship. Emotional dependence here becomes an invisible minefield. It's there, but no one notices until it's too late. A simple example can be seen on social media. Influencers who master this art alternate closeness with mystery. They respond to some comments, leave others unanswered. They share intimate moments, but keep a part of them inaccessible. This game creates a cycle of expectation and frustration that holds their followers captive, as if they were willing captives. It's a direct reflection of virtù and fortuna, the ability to manage emotions and the luck of having a receptive audience. But make no mistake, it's not just vanity, it's a power strategy. Creating emotional dependence ensures that the other person not only admires them, but also fears losing access. And this fear is the link that holds the chain together. But there's an even more refined weapon. It's not just about capturing the heart, but also about confusing the mind, the secret of calculated ambiguity. The secret of calculated ambiguity. Ambiguity is one of the sharpest weapons for those who wish to maintain power without overexposing themselves. When someone never fully reveals themselves, never delivers an absolute answer, they create a space of doubt in the mind of others, and doubt is fertile ground for imagination and for fear. Machiavelli knew that decisions based on true human nature are not built on certainties, but on the manipulation of uncertainty. This is why a leader often leaves questions unanswered, contracts with open clauses, or silences laden with meaning. The appearance of virtue is maintained, but always with loopholes that allow for different interpretations. After all, the end justifies the means when those means keep everyone in suspense, guessing their next steps. Ambiguity is not weakness, it's strategy. The less predictable you are, the harder it is to be controlled. A clear example is in the field of diplomacy. Governments that use carefully ambiguous phrases never fully commit, but they also never close doors. This calculated ambiguity keeps allies hopeful and enemies uncertain. It's the calculated use of force in an almost invisible way, not by attack, but by the ever-present possibility that one might happen. In the corporate world, executives do the same when they announce changes coming soon, without specifying what they're going to do. This small dose of uncertainty causes employees and competitors to reorganize their actions around something that doesn't even exist yet. It's a way to position yourself at the center of the board without moving all the pieces. It's, in essence, transforming ambiguity into your own loyal army, because everyone ends up trapped in the need to decipher what you really meant. In everyday life, anyone can apply this secret. Think of a conversation. Instead of giving ready-made answers, you can ask questions that leave the other person reflecting, captivated by your enigma. This is virtù and fortuna in action, knowing when to speak and when to let silence work in your favor. Calculated ambiguity creates a natural magnetism because human beings are uncomfortable with what they can't decipher. It's like reading a book that never reveals everything, but is captivating precisely for that reason. This kind of approach generates fascination and respect at the same time. And if well applied, it can transform your presence into something almost mythical. No one knows for sure whether you are trustworthy or dangerous, whether you are an ally or a rival. This aura paves the way for another subtle and powerful weapon, the strategic use of scarcity and absence. The strategic use of scarcity and absence. Scarcity is one of the most powerful forces in human psychology. What is rare, or seems rare, gains instant value. It's the same logic Machiavelli applied to power. You don't give everything away at once, but rather enough to keep others thirsting for more. Politics guided by reality shows that people don't value what is abundant, but rather what has an air of exclusivity. A leader who is always available loses an aura of importance. One who appears sparingly but at calculated moments creates expectation. This absence becomes presence, as it occupies the minds of others with a constant question: when will he return? What will he do when he appears? The calculated use of force here is not to grant unlimited access, but to create a dance of presence and absence that strengthens one's own image. In marketing, this principle is used daily. Products launched as limited editions spark an immediate rush, even when the item itself isn't extraordinary. People act out of fear of losing, not just the desire to gain. This is a decision based on true human nature. Similarly, in relationships, strategic absence can arouse more desire than constant presence. A partner who doesn't always give in keeps the allure alive. Here, the Machiavellian teaching, better to be feared than loved, gains nuances. The fear of losing creates a bond even stronger than love itself. But be careful. If the game goes on too long, absence can turn into resentment. The secret is to maintain balance, making each return feel like a victory for those who were waiting. Want to apply this in a practical way? In the digital environment, for example, instead of publishing excessive content, select strategic moments. Build anticipation, leave spaces of silence, and return with something impactful. It's the same as a musician who holds a note, creating tension before unleashing the final chord. This is where virtù and fortuna meet, the ability to control time and the luck of being remembered even in absence. Thus, you transform emptiness into presence and scarcity into power. Leaders who know how to disappear at the right moment return stronger. It's a cycle that strengthens authority and creates emotional dependence. And once absence becomes a weapon, it's time to understand another piece of this invisible chessboard: reputation, which is the sharpest of invisible weapons. Reputation as an invisible weapon. Reputation is like a shadow that arrives before a person. It opens doors, seals alliances, and often decides battles without a single move being made. Machiavelli knew that the end justifies the means when building that image guarantees lasting power. Reputation works like invisible armor. It protects without needing to be tested. Think of leaders who are remembered more for the aura they built than for their concrete actions. It's the appearance of virtue that perpetuates itself, even when reality is much harsher. And here's the crucial point: reputation isn't exactly truth, it's perception. Those who understand this use politics guided by reality, not ideals. After all, what matters is not who you are, but what others believe you are. In the corporate world, reputation is a valuable currency. An investor doesn't invest millions in a company solely for the product, but for the trust they have in the name and track record of its leaders. Similarly, artists, writers, and influencers thrive on the weight their reputation carries. That's why every public action must be measured. A thoughtless comment can undermine years of work. This is where the calculated use of force comes in, knowing when to speak, when to remain silent, and when to let one's reputation do the work. Leaders who have loyal armies of their own are those whose image precedes any order. Reputation becomes so powerful that even enemies hesitate to attack them for fear of challenging what seems unshakable. And how to build this invisible weapon? The answer lies in small, consistent gestures repeated until they become a brand. Being seen as trustworthy, bold, or ruthless depends less on speeches and more on consistency. A practical example: Warren Buffett built his reputation as a conservative and reliable investor, and this gives him credibility even when he decides to take risks. This is virtù e fortuna, skill and opportunity working together. For anyone, This means tending one's own actions like tending a garden. With every word and decision, something is planted in the minds of others. Reputation grows silently, but when it blossoms, it can topple or build empires. But there's an even more acute detail. While reputation is built on what is shown, true strength is revealed in what is never explained. The power to remain unjustified. The strength of never justifying yourself. Excessive justification gives ammunition to the enemy. Those who constantly explain every gesture convey insecurity, and insecurity is weakness. Machiavelli observed that decisions must be based on true human nature, and human nature is cruel to those who express doubt. Silence, when used intentionally, is more powerful than any justification. It is the calculated use of force, holding back words and letting the weight of authority speak for itself. Of course, it is not always easy to resist the temptation to explain oneself, but that is precisely where strength reveals itself. A leader, a strategist, even a simple citizen who maintains their posture without justifying themselves exudes confidence. After all, it is better to be feared than loved when the goal is to maintain respect, and respect never comes from those who beg for understanding. An everyday example. In the workplace, an employee who tries to explain every small delay or error tends to lose credibility quickly. On the other hand, one who acknowledges it with few words and moves on conveys control. It's like maintaining the appearance of virtue, even in the face of failure. Politicians master this art. When faced with scandals, many don't rush to offer explanations. Instead, they stand firm, as if above the need to defend themselves. This stance, though risky, is sustained by the Machiavellian logic that the end justifies the means. Silence here can be interpreted as trust, and trust is magnetic. Those who justify themselves too much appear fragile. Those who don't justify themselves never seem untouchable. Applying this takes practice. The next time you feel like explaining yourself for something small, try saying nothing. Notice how silence changes the dynamic. This isn't arrogance, it's strategy. It's like having your own loyal armies. Your posture becomes a fortress that doesn't need to be defended with words. This is the essence of virtu and fortuna, having the ability to control yourself and the luck to be perceived as solid. Interestingly, the less one explains themselves, the more room they give others to create narratives in their minds. And often, these narratives are even more positive than reality. But there's an even finer art. Not just avoiding justifications, but transforming others' emotions into weaknesses that can be exploited. The gift of turning emotion into weakness. Emotions are the breach through which power enters. Anger, envy, pride, even love, all can be transformed into vulnerability if observed carefully. Machiavelli already understood that politics should be guided by reality, not ideals. And the reality is that most people are governed more by their hearts than by reason. The secret lies in observing and identifying what triggers each individual. Those who are easily angered can be led astray. Those who seek approval can be manipulated by occasional praise. It's the practice of making decisions based on true human nature. Using emotions as a weapon isn't gratuitous cruelty. It's strategy. The end justifies the means when the goal is to maintain the upper hand. And in this game, the more the other feels, the easier it is to control them. See how this plays out in the financial market. Investors who get carried away by euphoria buy at the peak. Those who let themselves be dominated by fear sell at the trough. Those who understand the emotional dynamics of the market and of other investors apply calculated leverage, buying at the dip and selling at the peak. The same logic works in relationships and negotiations. A simple example. If someone shows nervousness when discussing prices, this emotion already reveals a willingness to compromise. It's like having your own loyal armies, but which are actually the other person's feelings serving your strategy. Transforming emotion into weakness is transforming vulnerability into a lever of power. It's the kind of game where being feared rather than loved finds fertile ground because fear stems from the perception that the other person sees beyond the obvious. In everyday life, you can apply this by observing more and reacting less. If someone tries to provoke anger, the simple act of remaining calm transfers control to you. This is virtù and fortuna, having the ability to control yourself and relying on the other person's luck not to notice you're giving in. A practical example, in an argument, instead of responding immediately, pause. This pause creates discomfort, and often the person reveals more than they'd like. It's at this point that emotion becomes weakness. Anger blinds, fear paralyzes, pride makes predictable. All of these are pathways to strategic manipulation. But there's an even more refined weapon. It's not enough to control other people's emotions. You need to understand the link between pleasure and guilt, which imprisons minds almost invisibly. The psychology of pleasure and guilt. Human beings are driven by two invisible engines, the desire for pleasure and the fear of guilt. Machiavelli would have called these decisions shaped by true human nature because no one escapes this internal game. Those who master this dynamic can lead crowds without raising their voice. Pleasure acts as bait and guilt as a chain. This is how religions, governments, and even consumer brands build their power. They promise pleasure in exchange for obedience, but plant guilt in those who dare to stray. It's the balance between what's allowed and what's not allowed that binds. Here, the calculated use of force is less physical and more emotional, giving the feeling of freedom, but maintaining clear boundaries. After all, it's better to be feared than loved when the fear is losing pleasure or carrying guilt. In the modern world, this game clearly appears in diets, social media, and even in entertainment consumption. Think of streaming series. They offer immediate pleasure in the next episode, but make the viewer feel guilty for having watched too much. This cycle keeps people hooked, always coming back for more. Luxury brands also exploit this. Products are purchased not just for the pleasure of possession, but for the fear of feeling guilty for not keeping up with the status quo. It's the appearance of virtue in a different guise, displaying discipline, control, and success, when in reality, one is bound by invisible chains. The psychology of pleasure and guilt is, in essence, a long-range weapon. Machiavelli would say that the end justifies the means when the goal is to keep a mass in constant search of relief. And anyone can apply this on a small scale. A teacher might praise a student for a good performance, but at the same time insinuate that they could have done even better. The pleasure of recognition mixes with the guilt of inadequacy. Result? The student tries harder, not just for the praise, but to silence the guilt. This is true virtù and fortuna, knowing how to balance positive and negative stimuli until the person becomes a self-imprisoned prisoner. This is why governments and institutions construct narratives that oscillate between rewards and punishments, between promises and chastisements. When well applied, pleasure and guilt become invisible shackles, stronger than any iron chain. And in this game, the next step is understanding the ultimate subtlety, attacking unseen, wounding without leaving a mark. The ability to attack without being seen. The most dangerous blow is not the one seen, but the one that strikes unnoticed. Machiavelli knew that the end justifies the means when the action takes place in the shadows, without the aggressor being pinpointed. Attacking unseen is the most refined of strategies because it disarms the victim while keeping the aggressor's image intact. It's what we call the appearance of virtue. On the outside, everything seems clean, but inside, the game is cold and calculated. This type of attack leaves no evidence, only consequences. It's politics guided by reality, not ideals, because the reality is that when the source of pain is unknown, the enemy becomes invisible and therefore impossible to combat. At this point, it's better to be feared than loved. Fear arises not from the attacker, but from the mystery of not knowing where the next blow will come from. Examples of this are everywhere. In politics, leaders who manipulate information, spreading discreet rumors, attack reputations without ever exposing themselves. In the marketplace, companies launch marketing campaigns that weaken their competitors without ever naming names directly. In personal relationships, a strategic silence or an unexpected absence can be a more devastating attack than any open confrontation. This is the calculated use of force. It's not the fist that brings down, but the shadow of the fist that never shows itself. It's like having your own loyal armies acting for you without you having to commit yourself. Those who attack unseen maintain the power of ambiguity and the solidity of their reputation, leaving the target confused and powerless. Applying this art requires patience and composure. It's necessary to learn to observe the battlefield and choose where to strike so that the wound opens on its own. It could be in an unspoken word, a calculated retreat, or even a concession that, behind the scenes, is a trap. This is the essence of virtu and fortuna, knowing the exact moment to act and letting chance take its toll. For those who master this game, there's no need for direct confrontation, because the enemy destroys itself trying to guess where it went wrong. This type of attack not only weakens, but wears down, because it consumes energy in the search for an invisible aggressor. And so the cycle closes, from mask to absence, from fear to guilt. Each psychological weapon interconnects as part of a silent war. Now that you've explored each of these psychological weapons, the question is inevitable. Will you continue to be manipulated by them, or will you learn to use them to your advantage? Because, like it or not, this game never ends. Machiavelli didn't write for princes by accident. He knew that life is made up of silent struggles, where the winner is the one who understands the human mind better than the others. And you? Will you continue to be guided by naive ideals, or will you accept that politics is guided by reality and that often the end justifies the means? Look around. Those who hold power today, in any area, didn't achieve it through effort alone, but through strategy. They used silent fear, reputation, scarcity, and invisible attacks. They turned emotions into weaknesses and made masks their armor. If you continue to ignore this, you'll be just another piece on this board. But if you apply yourself, you can become the player who moves the pieces. So, what will you choose? Remain a spectator or take on the role of strategist? Leave your answer in the comments. I want to know, which of these weapons do you feel most present in your life today? And more, which do you intend to master first? If something in this video opened your eyes, don't put it off. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because future content will delve even deeper into what few dare reveal, and you won't want to miss out.